Iran summons the British ambassador to Tehran for an explanation on the seized Iranian tanker. Student and teacher demonstrations are met by police repression in Honduras. And teachers in Chile protest for education funding, vowing to extend their strike. From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I'm Doris Polo, and this is From the South. We begin in Honduras, where police have once again resorted to using tear gas on students and teachers as they return to demonstrations in Tegucigalpa. The Platform for the Defense of Healthcare and Education called people to head back to the streets on Thursday and Friday following 3 days of classes and medication services. The medical attention was particularly necessary to confront the country's mosquito-borne dengue crisis. Secondary school students have maintained protests throughout the country since last week, occupying their high schools and blocking the roads in front of their schools. Venezuela's government has rejected the methodology used to build the report released by the UN Human Rights Commission. According to the 70 observations presented by the government, the report contains countless inaccuracies, errors, facts presented out of context, and false statements, and used selected sources while utilizing few official sources. That same response states that 82% of the interviewees used in the report were from individuals outside of Venezuela. Additionally, achievements made and measures implemented by the government were selectively omitted, including investment in social programs. Social organizations from Venezuela have condemned the effect of sanctions imposed on the country. They met the UN Special Rapporteur for Poverty in the margins of the Human Rights Council in Geneva.
We are participating in the 41st session of the UN Human Rights Council in Geneva, Switzerland, with the Special Rapporteur for Extreme Poverty. We held a meeting and discussed the situation of human rights in Venezuela. We've said that the deteriorating conditions for Venezuelans since 2014 until now are directly linked to the application of coercive measures against the country. We asked the Special Rapporteur to visit Venezuela, and President Nicolás Maduro invited all the organizations related so they can see for themselves the real situation. We've also asked their support for the national dialogue for peace and fundamental issues of human rights in our country. Today, the coercive measures have a direct impact in the levels of poverty and should be sanctioned by the entire international community.
In St. Lucia, the CARICOM Conference of Heads of Government has been convened to coincide with CARICOM Day. The day marks the signing on July 4th, 1973 of the Treaty of Chaguaramas, which created the Caribbean Community and Common Market. At this moment, meetings and workshops are in progress. Among the items the heads of government will discuss are the CARICOM Single Market and Economy, CSME. It's expected that measures to enhance the CSME will be agreed on. Our correspondent Alison Kentish reports on the second day of the CARICOM summit.
CARICOM leaders will be meeting in closed sessions over the next 2 days. However, the CARICOM Secretariat has been forthcoming about just what is on their agenda for discussion. From 9 o'clock this morning, they have been meeting in a special working group. They are expected to break at 1 o'clock and resume for a special caucus at 3 p.m. The CARICOM Secretariat issued a press release that states that the leaders will be focusing on the implementation of the CARICOM Single Market and Economy, and other matters down for deliberations include efforts to enhance cooperation among states in tackling crime and in addressing other security concerns, strengthening CARICOM's presence in Africa, and financing for the Sustainable Development Goals. The heads will meet with Norway's Prime Minister and the Secretary General of the United Nations today to discuss a sustainable ocean economy and tackling pollution. Foreign affairs issues include bolstering CARICOM's stance and assistance as a mediator in the ongoing issues in Venezuela, and also tackling Venezuela, Guyana, and Belize-Guatemala border issues. 11 heads of state are present at the summit, along with ministerial country representatives.
That was Alison Kentish with that report. On Wednesday, CARICOM member states reaffirmed their non-negotiable policy of non-interference in the political situation in Venezuela. This was the firm statement by CARICOM's outgoing chairman, Dr. Timothy Harris, during his opening address. Dr. Harris commended CARICOM nations that have supported Venezuela during this time, while he maintains that the region remains a zone of peace. Dr. Harris, who is also the Prime Minister of St. Kitts, says when it comes to Venezuela's affairs, CARICOM must play a role of honest broker.
International contact group on several occasions, while our foreign ministers have engaged with Venezuelan opposition representatives. We have consistently argued that the cardinal principles to undergird a resolution of the political crisis in Venezuela should include: 1. Non-interference in the internal affairs of Venezuela.
The United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres zeroed in on the issue of climate change when he addressed the CARICOM summit opening. Guterres has called for collective advocacy in the Caribbean to address rising global temperatures and ocean degradation.
As climate-related natural disasters grow in frequency and severity, the risks to families and to development overall will only intensify. And the Caribbean experience makes abundantly clear that we must urgently reduce global emissions and work collectively to ensure that global temperature rise does not go beyond 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels. And that is why I'm asking all leaders from government and the private sector to present plans at my Climate Action Summit, or at the latest by December 2020, to cut greenhouse emissions by 45% by 2030 and get to carbon neutrality by 2050.
And CARICOM Secretary General lamented that measures which are supposed to be implemented under the Caribbean single market economy are not happening fast enough.
We have been engaged in a challenging task to create one market out of 12 developing economies, each of which is at different levels of development. We have persevered and we have made progress. However, we are lagging behind the deadlines agreed to in the implementation plan. It is in our interest to accelerate this process and to create a competitive regional economy. We have brought on board the private sector, labor, civil society, representatives of whom will engage with heads of government at this meeting.
Grenada is refuting claims that it is dealing with an influx of Venezuelan migrants. Assistant Police Commissioner Jesmond Prince issued the disclaimer last week. This follows an announcement from the U.S. that its naval hospital ship Comfort will offer services to the island during a 5-month humanitarian mission to countries, quote, overwhelmed by Venezuelans. In response, Prince said Venezuelans that visit Grenada do so for vacation and return home. Grenada's Tourism Authority also recorded a decline in Venezuelans arriving in the country for 2019.
Got an hour to wait before my tour.
Guyana's president has invited the opposition leader to hold talks later on Thursday about the appointment of a new Elections Commission's chairman. The matter has been on the political front burner for months. Last week, the Elections Commission chairman demitted office after a recent court ruling found that his appointment was flawed. A new appointment would be critical as Guyana is facing early elections because of a no-confidence motion passed last December. St. Vincent and the Grenadines is beginning its year as chairman of the Caribbean Forum of the African, Caribbean and Pacific, CARIFORUM. The country assumed its role effective July 1st until June 30th, 2020. During its chairmanship, St. Vincent and the Grenadines is expected to host 2 ministerial meetings and senior official meetings on various schematic areas. The chairmanship role rotates annually in alphabetical order between CARIFORUM member states. We'll take a short break now. When we come back, human rights activists in Colombia are criticizing the role of businesses in the country's armed conflict. Join us in a few. Welcome back. Teachers in Chile are holding more protests after they agreed to extend their strike demanding more funding for education. Our correspondent Paola Dragnik has more from Santiago.
This strike has now been going on for 5 weeks. It is very solid across the country, and 500,000 school students in Chile are without classes. The government has called the stoppage illegal and is refusing any serious negotiations. In fact, during Tuesday's eclipse of the sun, the Minister of Education, Macala Gubeles, chose to travel with President Sebastián Pinera to observe that, instead of going to the Congress where she had been summoned to report on the teachers' strikes. The attitude of the authorities has annoyed the teachers even more. They say they are not getting any response to their long list of demands, which go from better pay and conditions to changes in the school curriculum. We should remind you that the government has decreed a number of alterations to the curriculum in recent years, including the removal of important subjects like history and physical education. This evening, the teachers are holding a big pot-banging protest with the support of many student groups.
That was Paola Dragnik with that report. Human rights organizations in Colombia have criticized the role of local and transnational companies during the country's armed conflict. They say they helped to force thousands of campesinos, indigenous people, and Afro-Colombians from their homes.
The armed conflict in Colombia displaced about 8 million people, most of them campesinos, as well as indigenous and Afro communities. Paramilitary groups forced them off their land, which was then often taken over by companies. The peace agreements were meant to give them compensation, but little has happened.
There should have been a large-scale return of land to those who were displaced, but there has been no clear policy to do this. President Duque doesn't seem to want to upset the companies. Some companies have enjoyed total impunity after seizing land in a very bloody way and breaking all of the agricultural and environmental regulations.
In recent years, human rights reports have identified almost 70 companies that appear to have appropriated land illegally. 3 of the worst offenders are Anglo-Shanti, Bancolombia, and the Argos Cement Company.
Argos has been condemned 12 times for stealing land in the region of Montes de Maria. In fact, it used 2 other companies to occupy the land illegally. It is not allowed to accumulate land which was meant to be handed out to the poor farmers with no land. But they used these maneuvers to do just that.
Another guilty company is that belonging to the president of the airline Avianca, Herman Efromovich. The Constitutional Court ordered him to hand back 5,600 hectares that belonged to the nation and were earmarked for campesinos forced off their land. But he hasn't complied.
We have been trying to enforce the order for more than 2 years, but the National Land Agency and the company are not cooperating and are not respecting the court order. As a result, more than 240 campesinos have still not been able to return to that land.
Members of the ruling Democratic Center Party claim there is a cartel of false victims. But a report by the Forjando Futuros Foundation says that 98% of the claimants have been recognized as victims, while 89% of those who oppose restitution themselves benefited from illegal land seizures.
About 25% of the land restitution orders have criticized the role of individuals, companies, public officials, and court officers who took part in the land grabs.
The Special Jurisdiction for Peace says that third parties, including companies, have until the 9th of September to appear before this peace court to answer for human rights violations during the armed conflict. If they don't, they should be tried in the normal courts, the same courts which so far have granted them total impunity.
At least 26 people have lost their lives after a fishing vessel capsized off the coast of Honduras. The incident, which has been described as one of the country's worst accidents at sea, happened near the town of Puerto Lempira. A search and rescue operation for other possible victims is underway. 47 people have so far been rescued. Local media reports say that the accident might have been caused by bad weather. Hundreds of people have taken to the streets in Argentina to protest against the policies of the government of Mauricio Macri, which seek to criminalize migration.
Under the slogan, "Migration is not a crime," migrants from various countries staged a demonstration against the obstacles put in the way of foreigners who want to regularize their status in Argentina.
Argentina had an advanced migration law that respected human rights and didn't make a difference whether migrants were documented or undocumented. But now this has changed. Now what we want the most is that if someone arrives here undocumented, they can still be regularized and receive the same rights as documented migrants or Argentinians. So they can contribute to this country, pay their taxes and other things.
A new system of remote settlement of foreigners was implemented in the country. And as a consequence, as of April, the National Migration Directorate had only processed 17% of the 63,000 applicants for migration.
There
are a lot of issues with this new system for requesting residency. Most families don't have access to computers. It has a very high cost attached and also has a whole system of arbitrary expulsions. This, like in the case of Vanessa, a Peruvian migrant who was deported from the country with her 2-year-old baby, while her 3-year-old children, all Argentinian citizens, were left behind in the country.
Security Minister Patricia Bullrich claims that 20% of prisoners are foreigners, but official data paints a totally different picture. It shows that the real number is around 6%. This is equivalent to just 0.3% of all migrants in the country.
On many occasions, the government, tabloids, and the rest of the press quickly link migration with crime, drug trafficking, but they never highlight all the positive contributions migrants do for this country. In reality, we are actually at a point where a big part of the workforce is made up of migrants. Meanwhile, the government continues denying their contribution of millions of dollars annually to Argentina. They keep creating situations and public policies that criminalize and expel migrants from the country.
Protesters are also demanding a halt to the expulsion of migrants. Under the slogan, "Stop Separating Families," they've called on the government of Macri to guarantee the rights of migrants, including children, and to respect family unity.
We'll take a short break now, and when we return, Malawians are protesting the results of the May presidential elections. Don't go away. Welcome back. Iran has summoned the British ambassador in Tehran to explain why British Marine commandos seized an Iranian tanker off Gibraltar. Britain says the Grace 1 supertanker was breaking EU sanctions by carrying oil to Syria. But the Iranian government says the action was illegal because those sanctions were not passed by the UN Security Council and are not recognized by Iran. Spain said the tanker was seized at the request of the United States in Spanish waters.
Naturally, we were aware of this operation. Police patrol boats were guarding the area, but we are studying the circumstance in which it happened. This was the result of a request from the United States to the United Kingdom, and we are looking into how it affects our sovereignty because it happened in waters which we consider belong to Spain.
The military and protest leaders have resumed talks in Sudan over the formation of a new governing body. The dialogue came after the African Union and Ethiopian mediators on Tuesday called on the two sides to resume long-stalled negotiations. Tensions soared after a crackdown on a long-standing protest camp outside the army complex killed dozens of demonstrators a month ago.
The two parties have agreed on many issues, which was very important, and they have decided to continue with the meeting tomorrow about the other issues. And also, they have decided to release all the political detainees who were held during the last incident in the country.
The death toll has risen to at least 55 from Tuesday night's airstrike on a detention center holding migrants in Libya. Women and children are among the dead, with more than 130 people injured in the bombing. The United Nations Security Council has strongly condemned the airstrike. Speaking after an emergency council meeting on Libya, UN Human Rights Chief Michelle Bachelet said the strike on the facility was a deliberate act and not a mistake, as both sides knew the location and coordinates of the facility. Peru's ambassador to the UN Security Council, Gustavo Mexia-Cuadra, said the council is yet to agree on what action to take against the perpetrators. Fresh protests have erupted in Malawi over disputed May presidential results. Opposition supporters took to the streets of the capital, Lilongwe, against the re-election of President Peter Mutharika, saying it had irregularities. Protesters claimed the election was marred with fraud, including that many results sheets were altered using typewriter correction fluid. The two main opposition parties have also challenged the vote outcome in the court.
It's the resolute commitment of every Malawian who wants to see justice roll in this country, in the offices, in the streets, in the corridors of power. I join the same Malawians because I am one of them aggrieved.
South Africa's economic freedom fighters leader has lost his application to declare the country's Riotous Assemblies Act unconstitutional. Julius Malema challenged the constitutionality of the act in the High Court, saying the state is using the apartheid-era laws to prosecute him. This relates to two incidents in which the state accused Malema of inciting violence when he urged his supporters to invade unoccupied land. In sports, West Indies beat Afghanistan by 23 runs in the final group match for both sides at the Cricket World Cup. Shai Hope top scored for the West Indies with 77 runs, while Nicholas Pooran and captain Jason Holder stepped up the pace as they reached 311 for 6. Afghanistan mustered 288 runs all out in reply to the fall to their 9th defeat out of 9, despite a fighting 86 from Ikram Ali Keel. No doubt it was a bittersweet moment for the Windies, as neither side can qualify for next week's World Cup semi-finals. In football, Peru will take on host Brazil in the Copa America final set for Sunday at the famous Maracana Stadium in Rio de Janeiro. Wednesday's game was a night to remember for Peru as the team knocked out reigning champions Chile with a 3-0 win in the semi-finals to secure the spot against Brazil. Peruvian fans were seen chanting and lighting the sky with fire torches while drumming and music played in celebration. And the celebration swept through Peru as thousands of fans in Lima basked in the massive defeat of Team Chile. This will be Peru's first Copa America final since 1975.
I'm super happy like all Peruvians. We had faith in our team and we knew that we were going to win. We were giving a super round match and we are here to celebrate.
We are happy because Peru has won and will have a rematch with Brazil. The final will be against Brazil after many years. Let Peru triumph.
We've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Doris Polo. Thank you for watching.